Good morning, everyone, and happy 4th of July to all of you out there who are celebrating the 4th. And even if you're not, I'm glad to invite you to celebrate with us our Independence Day in America. And part of that celebration is a recognition of our veterans and their service to this country. And as a very small gesture in that regard, I posted a link to the donation page of the Gary Sinise Foundation at the top of the chat box and in the description. If you have a couple of bucks to spare, please consider donating to the Gary Sinise Foundation to help out our veterans. And if you can't donate, that's perfectly fine. But if you can share that out on social media, that would be very much appreciated. And before I even have a chance to begin, oh my gosh, Mr. Tickle Trunk, thank you so much for the super sticker. Happy, shiny, dancy, lovely dog cat fox. Oh, dog cat fox.
Wowee, wow.
Oh, that's an irate Alex dog cat fox. And why is he irate? Well, because his side lost the war, which is why I'm here. And holy cats, again, speaking of dog cat fox, holy dog cat foxes, Kiever Dam, thank you so much. That is ridiculously generous for the happy jumping fireworks dog cat fox. Oh, dog cat fox.
Wowee, wow.
And appropriately, that is a Kiever Dam dog cat fox. Thank you so much, Kiever Dam. It's very ridiculously generous of you. And speaking of ridiculous generosity, thank you again, Derek LaRue, as always, for your continued support and generosity. Even though there is no dog cat fox there, I'm feeling in a dog cat fox kind of mood.
Wowee, wow.
That is P-Dog Night Dog Cat Fox. P-Dog Night Cat Fox, who was streaming just before me. I made sure to time mine to not step on his toes. So if you guys don't know about P-Dog Night and the Morning Night Live, his broadcast that goes on just about daily, I think, every morning around 7 a.m. Pacific time, 10 a.m. Eastern. He goes over the news of the day with his very unique perspective and obviously a much better radio voice than I possess. But go check out P-Dog Night. But before I get into anything else, who's joining me on this 4th of July, taking a break from barbecues and fireworks and burnt fingers? John Miller. Did you used to go by Jonathan, or am I just like, is that my headcanon or something? Anyway, John Miller, Kiefer Tam, Brittany Holland, Mike R., Mr. Tickle Trunk, of course, Chicago Mike, Noah Asensio, Old Guy Gamer, Derek LaRue, of course, Ryan R. And Mike R., no relation. Little Bunny Foo Foo, hopping through the forest. Yeah, I remember that song. Let's see. First time getting to watch Scribe live? Well, hello. Welcome to the show. Hope you enjoy it. Bridget. Hello. A friend of the show. Hello. Always a friend of the show. Simon Willikins. Good morning. Robert Pincus. Who else is here? Rotten Corpse, Resolute Germ. And I think that's everybody I see. If I missed you, if you're lurking, if you're in the future, good morning and hello. And thank you, John Miller. No, always John. Third one in a row in my family. Third John the third. As far as I know, I am the only one of my kind in my entire family line as far as first names go. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but either way, it's tradition is good. And speaking of traditions, yes, we are here once again to celebrate every year, as we do, the independence of our country. And I know it might be a little contrived. I know it might seem a little cheesy, but I honestly believe that the decision to abolish affirmative action last week now was another step forward for our country's development and our continued pursuit towards independence, independent thought, independence of merit, independence of opportunity, in doing away with one of the, if not the, as far as I know, last legal vestiges of racial discrimination in this country, where you can value someone on the basis of their skin color and you don't get in trouble for it. Well, that's gone by the wayside now. And as a consequence, the world has reacted. And I did a video of the initial on day of reactions from certain news outlets and institutions. It's been a few days. I've collected some additional articles and pieces regarding that. And just because it seems to be my ballywick, let's talk more about affirmative action and DEI on this Independence Day. And hopefully in the process, as I drink my American Coca-Cola out of a glass bottle, let's learn what we can about what the consequences might be or are occurring as they are. Because if you'll take note, you will see that several giant corporations have recently, and just coincidentally, I'm sure, in relation to the affirmative action decision, decided to restructure their DEI programs. The first step of letting go or firing their DEI executives. But I'm sure I'll have more on that as time goes on. But first, let's start off with a little news piece from NPR. There's no visuals here or anything. I just slapped on their logo to an audio file. This article came out, I think, yesterday or the day before, and it is a little radio broadcast from NPR. We'll also have an article from NPR. Most of this is me reading articles, but this first one I thought we'd go through a little piece of audio. So with that, I'll start off with a few seconds for a sound test. You guys tell me if you can hear it, and then we will proceed.
We're going to look more closely now at how the fight to end affirmative action was orchestrated. Some scholars and activists say it was consciously pitting Asian Americans against other communities of color.
Okay, well, you guys hear that okay? Orchestrated pitting Asian Americans against communities of color. Well, the fundamental question was, should you use race to evaluate someone's merit or worthiness at all? But okay, that's one theory. Sounds good, says Mike R. Loud but good. I can turn it down a smidge, I suppose. I tried to boost it to make sure it was audible. All right.
To bring about the end of the policy. NPR's Sandia Dirks reports.
Oh, so you do admit that it's a policy, not a law. Okay, that's good.
In 2015, the conservative activist Edward Bloom stood in a nondescript conference room in Houston in front of about a dozen Asian Americans.
How do we go about making it impossible for universities to use race and ethnicity?
Bloom's the main force behind the fight to end affirmative action. He's not a lawyer, but he's repeatedly used the courts to try and roll back civil rights era legislation.
Civil rights era legislation? Okay, I don't know Bloom's entire curriculum vitae, let's say, but affirmative action is civil rights legislation?
He was also behind the case that gutted the Voting Rights Act. To end affirmative action, Bloom had first used white students who were claiming discrimination, but those cases failed.
Yeah, I wonder why that might be. All right, is it because there's a stigma against any discrimination taking place against white people as not actual discrimination? White privilege and so on and so forth? Yeah, no, I don't deny that making Asian students the, for lack of a better phrase, the poster children of this movement was meant to make a point that racial discrimination affects even people who aren't white in a negative way. And what are you going to do then? Right? Because it seems like, oh, well, of course, affirmative action is there to advantage people who aren't white because white people always had the advantage. And somehow that's supposed to justify racial discrimination as an idea in the first place. Well, yeah, no, it makes better headlines if you show that a non-white demographic is being unfairly ruled against on the basis of their skin color versus others. Because then that shows that racial discrimination is bad, which shouldn't have to be said, but apparently needs to be said in a particular way to get attention. And I think NPR is kind of making the point in their complaint.
I needed plaintiffs. I needed Asian plaintiffs.
And now he was looking for Asian Americans to play the role of affirmative action's victim.
Were they not a victim of affirmative action?
In big issue cases, it's common for legal activists to cast plaintiffs, says Berkeley law professor Ian Haney Lopez.
So the strategy isn't at all uncommon. Okay.
But the recasting came with a rebranding.
This isn't really about white people at all. This is really about harm to minorities.
Except that's not really true.
It's not really true? Okay. Well, here's the thing. Let's say it didn't harm minorities. Let's say it didn't harm minorities at all. Let's say it favored minorities in every single instance. Would that make it okay?
Says Oyan Poon, who studied Harvard's admission data.
There is no evidence that there's a practice of anti-Asian discrimination.
Okay. Well, what do you have to counter the claim?
Poon is a visiting scholar at the University of Maryland, College Park, and an expert in race and admissions. She says the data does not back up Bloom's claim. Anti-Asian racism is very real.
Uh-huh. But
And there is evidence that there was bias by some admissions officers.
Okay. So wait. There's no evidence that there's any discrimination against Asian students. I mean, but there is discrimination against Asian people in this country, and there was evidence of bias by admissions officers. But
ranking Asian Americans lower on personality traits. But Poon says what happened here is something different.
Whoa. What? All right, there's no evidence of any racial discrimination. Aside from this evidence of racial discrimination. Okay.
Predominantly white conservative political forces are leveraging this experience of being racially marginalized among Asian Americans to say, yeah, and by the way, there's this policy that you're not benefiting from.
Well, is that untrue?
I feel like Asian Americans have been used.
That's Jeff Chang, a
You're right. Asian Americans have been used as an example of a non-white demographic that has been ruled against in opportunities on the basis of their race, which is just to underscore the idea that we should have had sealed into our minds since 1964, at least legally speaking, that you're not supposed to discriminate people on the basis of their skin color. Doesn't matter what their skin color is. So I wonder if our NPR producer here would be fine with the idea of, well, affirmative action actively discriminates against white people because they're white and for no other reason. Is that good? Is that a principle that we want to continue? I mean, but now we bring in Asian people now. Now that's a problem. Well, here's the thing. Whatever racial demographic you put into that argument, the argument is sound because racial discrimination is poison. Doesn't matter what the race is. But this Bloom guy obviously saw that he's not going to get much traction by saying, oh, white people are being victimized, because obviously white people can't be victimized because they're white, right? So he has to make a point. He has to make a point that can't be easily ignored. The same point that happened when the story first came out. Under the Trump administration, there was an article that came out talking about these cases and these movements to try to take down affirmative action. And the initial headlines erroneously said that this was all done on behalf of white people, because the people reporting just kind of ran to the presses without thinking about who the actual plaintiffs were. And then only afterwards, like hours later, they had to change their headlines because, well, I guess the case isn't actually about white people. Making the very point. It's about race. It's about valuing race. Doesn't matter who it is.
a senior advisor at the social justice nonprofit Race Forward.
There is an entire history of Asian Americans working very hard to get affirmative action programs established.
Chang is part of that history. In the 1980s at Berkeley, he and other students got the University of California to admit they were suppressing Asian American admissions in favor of white students.
Okay, and so if it had been flipped around to say they were oppressing Asian American students in favor of black students, or they're oppressing black students in favor of Asian students, or if they were giving preference to one race over other races, why is this not inherently a problem regardless? I know I keep making this point, but I don't understand why the principle isn't more important than the color of the person who's the victim.
The name of the group he co-founded?
The Student Coalition for Fair Admissions.
The Student Coalition for Fair Admissions, okay.
The name of the group Edward Bloom founded 2 decades later. Students for Fair Admissions.
So wait, he's founded a group that was in favor of preferential racial discrimination, and the other guy founded a group that was in favor of taking away racial preferences. And they have similar-ish names. Okay, well, did you sue him for copyright or something?
Chang doesn't think the similar name is a coincidence.
Oh, well, let's say it isn't. Let's say it was one grand conspiracy to piggyback off of another thing. So, what is this childish territory complaints here? Okay, what is the, okay, you've already said that there was no evidence that Asian American students were being discriminated against at Harvard. And yet then you gave us evidence that Asian American students were being discriminated against at Harvard. Okay, and then you got a guy who did a thing years and years and years ago that stands in direct opposition to this other thing that just happens to have a similar name. And
I know that they had to have been reading the stuff that we were writing.
I know they were looking at my stuff. I'm the center of the universe. My little association that did a thing many, 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 many years ago in a particular state. Obviously, they were cribbing off of our notes because we're so awesome. Sorry, I can't help but be a little sarcastic against an organization that was promoting racism.
The lawsuits Bloom filed on behalf of Students for Fair Admissions didn't name any Asian American students, but one or two have spoken publicly, including with Fox's Laura Ingram.
We found one student from that group willing to tell us why he believes he's the victim of racial discrimination. And it turns out he's a minority, too.
18-year-old Georgia Tech student John Wong was rejected from his top 6 schools despite stellar grades and test scores. So he turned to Students for Fair Admissions, who ran his numbers through their model.
Edward Bloom told me my results, and so they said I had a 20% chance of gaining admission to Harvard as an Asian American, and then a 95% chance as an African American.
This is key to the attack on affirmative action.
Yes, it is key to the attack on affirmative action. Is your race weighted in your favor or your disfavor? Yes or no? And the answer is obviously, demonstrably, yes. It's not even a question. It's part and parcel with the policy. It's stated in the rhetoric, in the justification. Race is a factor that is considered in admissions, full stop. Is that right or is that wrong? Is that in accordance with not only the spirit of our Constitution, but the black letter law of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VI? Yes or no? It's from the beginning of my channel, I have never understood why this is such a conundrum for people. It just every time I hear this, it just blows my mind. It never gets old, which is just, I don't know.
Asian American rejection is directly tied to Black and Latino acceptance, says Sally Chen with Chinese for Affirmative Action.
Pitting Asian American communities against, in particular, Black and Latinx communities.
Okay, you already failed the test by saying Latinx.
Is about undermining the.
Wait, did the NPR person with the NPR? Hold on, I'm gonna back up a little bit. Did the NPR producer say Latinx, or that my brain just kind of flipped for a second?
In particular.
Sorry, not enough.
Asian American rejection is directly tied to Black and Latino acceptance.
Okay, Latino. Okay, because I've heard, and I've seen this several times, and I was just on Twitter the other day where some organization referred to Latinos as Latine peoples. Mexican Iron Man lost his shit reading that, and every time I see that in my mind, my brain I've never seen that word before. It's not common to my experience at all. So when I see that word, my brain says it's the word latrine, which is just hilarious to me because it's somebody trying to find a middle ground between Latino and Latinx and still sound like they're intelligent or academic or something. It's silly. But anyway, sorry.
Says Sally Chen with Chinese for Affirmative Action.
Pitting Asian American communities against, in particular, Black and Latinx communities is about undermining the accomplishments of a lot of Black and Latinx students.
Accomplishments? Okay, how? How is that undermining the accomplishments of Black and Latino students?
And she says it taps right into the model minority myth.
The model minority myth. Okay, so all this comes down to, again, is that you think evaluating people on the basis of their race is a good thing. You're trying to get around it by going after all this culture war stuff, but it really comes down to the core issue, doesn't it? it's okay to value someone on the basis of their race.
That's the stereotype that Asian Americans have been able to bootstrap their way to the American dream solely because they are hardworking, says Janelle Wong, director of the Asian American Studies program at the University of Maryland, College Park.
And there's no implicit or unconscious bias that takes place, even though you've already admitted to it, in admissions or colleges that says an Asian student doesn't need this help because of those stereotypes, right? There's nothing about the model minority myth that doesn't have the converse effect of saying this type of person doesn't need the additional help of affirmative action. Right? Either you are evaluating someone on their merits or you are not. Either you're making assumptions about someone's lifestyle, someone's capabilities, someone's detriments, whatever else on the basis of their race, or you're not.
It is a really important tool that has been used historically to undermine other non-white groups pressing for justice, to say, well, this non-white group, Asian Americans, can succeed, so why can't Black or Latinx groups?
The myth ignores.
Yeah, why? Why? That's a very good question. Why are you assessing someone's capability or potential on the basis of their race? Yeah, that's a good question.
The long legacies of systemic racism faced by Black Americans. It ignores selective recruiting.
Wait, I gotta back up. Sorry, my brain just got boggled a little bit there again.
This program at the University of Maryland, College Park.
It is a really important tool that has been used historically to undermine other non-white groups pressing for justice, to say, well, this non-white group, Asian Americans, can succeed, so why can't Black or Latinx groups?
The myth ignores the long legacies of systemic racism faced by Black Americans. It ignores selective recruiting of highly educated immigrants, and it enforces a false story about Asian Americans.
So what we should be doing then is not making assumptions about someone's quality, capability, potential, or anything else on the basis of their race. Is that the message I'm getting here? Is that the model minority myth is a negative and unhelpful stereotype of Asian Americans? Okay, you know what? I agree. Let us not assume to know something about someone's capabilities, quality, whatever on the basis of that. Let's just do away with that. Let's just do away with those racial stereotypes when assessing someone's merit. I absolutely agree. Now, tell me again why you're for affirmative action.
Who are not a monolith.
Research shows that those Asian Americans who internalize this myth are also more likely to exhibit anti-Black attitudes and to be anti-affirmative action.
Oh, okay. So Asians are inherently racist because of their inherent capabilities or assumed capabilities. Well, how could we try to mitigate this? What could we do as a society under custom and law to try to do away with this idea of internalizing a racial stereotype? What could we do you think, guys?
Wong says this false narrative that Asian American seats are being taken by less qualified Black and Latino students isn't just racist. It's a misdirect.
It is a splash made to make a point. You're right. This entire thing was contrived to get the question on the table in front of the Supreme Court, to finally put it in front of a thinking court that has the Constitution on one side and completely contradictory policy on the other, and say, wait a second, there's what's written in stone and there's what's written in water over here. Which one takes precedence? Oh yeah, that's right. No, look, the whole Ed Bloom thing, the whole case, everything. Yes, it was all orchestrated and contrived to get the case in front of the Supreme Court and to make a splash. Yes, but what was the fundamental question asked and pondered in the decision? Was it Asian American students? What was it? I read it out loud. Was the main thrust and theme of the majority opinion about Asian American students or race relations or anything else? No, it was about the letter of the law and the fundamental injustice of assessing someone on the basis of their race for the sake of an opportunity. Doesn't matter what the race was, but you guys want to focus on the window dressing when you're not taking a look at the product. And besides which, nothing you've brought up so far has disproven the claim that affirmative action is racist.
The recruitment of Asian Americans into this movement provides a cover for white supremacy.
Oh! It provides a cover for white supremacy. Okay, so every Asian American who took part in this or had a complaint or found themselves failing to get into the college of their choice, even if their grades and every other thing that they've done in their lives built up to that point, all of them, in complaining about affirmative action, are servicing white supremacy. Okay.
A 2019 study found that 43% of white students admitted into Harvard got in because they were legacy students, their parents had donated large sums of money, or they played a usually pretty expensive sport.
Oh, hey, all right. I'm on the exact same page right here. Legacy admissions should go by the wayside. The mechanism of legacy admissions is effectively no different than affirmative action. You're putting weight onto something that has nothing to do with someone's merit and is separate from themselves and not determinative of their own abilities. Yes, do away with legacy admissions. Do away with my daddy donated a bunch of money. You know, you pay your tuition like everybody else. You get it on your merits like everybody else. I am perfectly fine with legacy admissions going by the wayside. Now, will Harvard get rid of those? Right? Because Harvard knows. I got it. Tunes. My father used to sing, he still does, he used to sing like old radio jingles just like haphazardly. And there was this one, it's a mother knows for kids in clothes. It's back to Robert Hall again. There was some store or something in California called Robert Hall. Maybe it still exists. I don't know. But he'd sing this song when I was a kid and it just, anyway, total aside, let's move back. Harvard doesn't want to get rid of legacy admissions or donation admissions or anything else because it brings in money, right? If you have established families with big bank accounts and you want to give them an easy pass into the college and maintain those donations and those trust funds and God knows what else, yes. But legacy admissions are as poisonous as affirmative action. And what's funny here, if you think about it for 2 seconds, which NPR obviously didn't, if they are against legacy admissions because it favors one particular race over another on average, why are they for affirmative action? I keep coming across this. People are complaining about legacy admissions, but then saying affirmative action should still be in place. Stop and think about what you're saying.
Quote, removing preferences for athletes and legacies would significantly alter the racial distribution of admitted students.
Okay, then do it. Do it. Make that the next target. I hope the Bloom guy goes after legacy admissions next. That'd be hilarious. I'd love to see what NPR says if they got the Bloom fair students thing goes after legacy admissions in his next case. That would be hilarious.
With the share of white admits falling and all other groups rising or remaining unchanged.
Okay, like I said, you've got no resistance from me. I want people to get into college on the basis of their merits, full stop. Full stop. Go ahead.
But Bloom didn't sue to end legacy admissions.
Well, he might next. These are two different things, lady. These are two different things. And you need to explain to me what is the mechanical difference between legacy admissions and affirmative action? What is the mechanical difference between daddy's bank account and my race in assessing my ability and my worthiness of getting into college? You explain that one to me.
He sued to end programs that boosted minority admissions for those who've historically had less access.
No, he sued against using race as a mark in the favor or disfavor of someone for academic opportunity. That's what he did. Setting aside race, a colorblind system, race-neutral admissions. Just like a race-neutral society is supposedly what we've been working for since 1964. So, it's nonsense.
Bloom didn't respond to our request for comment, but he's called accusations of racism intellectually lazy and has said it's unclear who will benefit from the end of affirmative action. But Oyeon Poon, who studies race and admissions, says it will help white and wealthy people.
To think somebody like Ed Blum is going to come along and basically bamboozle young people into thinking like these policies are actually against us when they're actually for us.
They're against us, but they're actually for us. Did you listen or read, and I'm just speaking rhetorically, obviously, to Clarence Thomas's recitation of his experience because of affirmative action? That he benefited from it, but always regretted the fact that he benefited from it because it always put a question mark over his head. Not only his head, but the people around him as to whether or not he actually deserved the opportunities he had. Right? The imposter syndrome deal? Yeah, that's not a myth. That's not a myth. And it's a terrible place to be. Why would you want to be suspicious of your own capabilities? Why would you want anybody else to suspect that maybe you don't deserve to be in a place, that you're given special treatment because of something that has absolutely nothing to do with your capability? Oh, but I'm talking about legacy admissions. Sorry.
It's just heartbreaking.
Poon and others say affirmative action was not perfect. It was a Band-Aid over a deeper wound of systemic racism and inequity.
It was systemic racism. It was inequity. It was inherently unjust. It was about as systemically racist as you could get. It was a written down legal precedent policy in colleges to use race as a checkmark on your worthiness score. What are you talking about?
But the Band-Aid has been ripped off. And at least for now, Poon says, there's no longer anything in place to stop the bleeding.
Oh my gosh.
Sandhya Dirks.
Oh my gosh, the bleeding. All right, well, there you go. That's NPR's little report in the aftermath of the decision on affirmative action. Now, I'm going to go through, I've got 6 articles to read of various types and things. Most of them are on the aftermath of affirmative action. Some of them are on other subjects. But, let's start off with this one from Forbes. And as I take a moment here to gather myself and set this up, please, if you haven't already, please take a look at the link at the top of the chat box or the link in the description to the Gary Sinise Foundation to support our veterans. If you can donate, please do so. If you can't, I would at least ask that you can share that link out on social media on this day, or the 4th of July, our Independence Day, to help support our veterans. So I appreciate your generosity and your sharing it out. I'll go to the chat real quick. Let's see. Okie Native. I went to college with a Chinese international student. When he got accepted, his grandfather sent a $50,000 donation to the school. He thought it was required and didn't understand merit scholarship. Oh, jeez. Did the college turn it away by any chance? The college say, oh, no, that's not necessary. We don't need a bribe after the fact. He just assumed it was the same as in China. Accepted, but you still need to bribe to keep him. Oh, geez. Different cultures, different customs. What can I tell you? Let's see. Anybody else here? Let's see. Tyrannus. Athletes should be exempt because that is merit-based. You don't get scouted because you rode the bench in high school. I'm still... See, I can see an argument against athletic merit qualifying for academic opportunity. You see, I think obviously your grades still need to be up to snuff. The athletic part, yes, but it shouldn't be the sole factor when it comes to an academic opportunity. It's a little bit of a cagey area, I get it, but if you want student athletes, not just athletes. Athletic ability alone should not be your in, as far as I'm concerned. There has to be something backing that up. Now, academic performance with a consideration for someone's focus on athletics, I can see that. Sure, a bit of a balance, right? Some give and some take, but there still needs to be a firm academic foundation for an athlete to get an in because of their athletic ability. I know it's a little touchy area, but that's in my 2-second assessment. That's what I'd say. All right, let's take a look at this article this is Forbes. Why the Supreme Court's affirmative action ruling is a danger for DEI efforts. Where were these stories back in October? I was talking about this as soon as the oral arguments came out. I was like, DEI is in trouble if affirmative action goes down. The Supreme Court ruled on Thursday to end affirmative action, and it's a canary in the coal mine when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, recognizing that race, specifically the race and ethnicities of historically marginalized groups, is an important consideration in increasing access. Okay, so you're Forbes, or at least this writer is for continued racial discrimination. Okay, in the past year, DEI efforts have increasingly? How about increasingly? Okay, increasingly come under threat, and the court's ruling against affirmative action in higher education only provides credence to leaders and organizations who are uninterested in more inclusive and equitable workplaces. You mean leaders and organizations that do not want to step over the line of federal law? Leaders in workplaces that never saw affirmative action as counting towards private sector businesses? I would love for either this article or one of the articles I'm going to read to explain to me how DEI legally has benefited from affirmative action this entire time. That is a question that I have been asking in one way, shape, or form for 7 years, still waiting for an answer. Leaders who have quietly dismantled or scaled back their DEI initiatives cited reasons ranging from a lack of immediate return on investment to financial pressure due to the pandemic. Okay, are those just smokescreens, or is there any truth to those things? As this new legal precedent reverberates throughout the business landscape. Now, hold on. Legal precedent, the business landscape. When did affirmative action apply to businesses that were not institutions of learning? Hey, tailed features here. Well, if a tailed feature's here, there's only one thing that can occur.
Well.
Whenever I need a smile, whenever I need my tummy to smile, I just have to play that. Tailed, hope you're having fun. Hope you're enjoying our Independence Day. You want to come on? If you're free, I'll send you the link. Let me know. I'd be happy to have you on. As I see my internet YouTube pals pop in. Yeah, I mean, if P-Dog showed up or anybody else, but geez, I don't really remember making that. It's probably for the best. It's probably for the best. It was probably the result of some kind of head trauma or something. But yeah, let me know if you want to come on, dude. I'll send you the link. Oh, cool. All right. Oh, cool. Let me do that real quick. Let me get the link, and I will send it to Tailed Feature. Where is he? There you are. All right. Come on, Twitter. Cooperate. There we go. All righty. So Tailed's got the link. I'll wait a second or three here because I haven't had a chance to talk to Tailed in a while now. It's going to be fun. Yes, my friend from across the pond, my Scott, not from a bot. I don't know. I can't come up with something clever here. But let's see. I'll continue this while I wait. As this new legal precedent reverberates throughout the business landscape, companies must grapple with its implications and strategize on maintaining workplace diversity and equity. Let's explore 3 key areas of action that you can take to preserve progress in the workplace: education and awareness. Well, that's 2 things. Allyship and advocacy. Oh boy, we're going to learn us something here, guys. We're going to learn us here something. I'll wait a second here, because if there's one person I know who should be around when learning things, it is a former teacher, Tailed Feature.
Wow, that was smooth. I
know, wasn't it? Gosh, I'm getting so good at this. It only took me 7 years.
I'm still trying to do it, man.
How are you doing, man?
Yeah, not too bad. Not long in from work. I'll need to be sticking the dinner on at some point soon, I think. But always got time. Well, I was going to say always got time to speak to you, but that's evidently not true since it's been months. But whenever I have the time, I always have time.
Yeah, no, it's just time zones. What time is it there now?
It is 5:40 p.m.
All right, yeah, it's just the time zones because by the time I'm done with work on a regular day, it's already bedtime for you over there, and it's all the crisscross and everything else. But yeah, guys, if you don't know about Tailed Feature, longtime friend of mine. In fact, I think basically we found each other around the same time we both started doing this. And over on his channel, Tailed Feature, he does a weekly show. If my brain is just took a glitch. He does a weekly show called, remind me, because my brain just went south.
Regional Variations.
That's right, Regional Variations. Why I wanted to say something about like linguistic something or something. Was there a name that you had before that show name for something else?
Only your Gaelic lessons.
That's probably it. Anyway, Regional Variations, where he speaks to several people from across the UK to talk about UK stuffs with varying accents and all that. Maybe that's what through my brain. He also has a channel called Scottish Feature, where you can see his walkabouts amongst the rocks and grass of Scotland, amongst other things. Some history there as well. And I don't think you haven't set up a channel for your musical endeavors, have you?
No, I mean I've got a SoundCloud, which is a bit gay, I realize, but I've got a Bandcamp as well. But I actually had to remove all but one of the tracks from my Bandcamp because they said they had a policy change where they basically said even if you're not making money from covers, you are not allowed to have covers on our website.
Oh, jeez.
And ironically, actually, the only song that I have ever made money from is a cover, but from a completely defunct band. That is the Count Dankula theme song. That is the only one that has actually made me any money ever, pretty much. But yeah, the band are completely defunct, and I don't think they'd really be bothered. And my version is so radically different from theirs. I don't think. I think if I got taken to court, they're welcome to have the £800 or whatever I've made in the 5 years since I made it.
Transformative work or something. I mean, if Puff Daddy samples something from a Rolling Stones song, he makes $1 zillion. But if you make something that is only maybe tangentially inspired by something else, suddenly you can't even make $1. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
There's not a lot of money in making music, and generally, unless you make something for like an advert or all that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, either way, I'm glad you're here. I don't know if you heard, but affirmative action got abolished.
I did hear that, and I kind of chuckled at the reaction because pretty much every person that I saw that was essentially heartbroken by this decision, they're basically tacitly saying that, well, then how else are Black people going to achieve things?
Right, which was the subtext of this NPR thing I just listened to. And again, as I pointed out, it's also amazing to me that on the one hand, they'll rail against abolishing affirmative action, but then they'll say, well, they should get rid of legacy emissions. Like, yes, they should. You're absolutely right. They should.
Your terms are acceptable.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, well, let's do that next. Well, you notice how he didn't sue against legacy emissions? Hey, maybe that's what he'll do next. Maybe step one was getting rid of the most egregious thing. Let's go for the step two, because the legacy stuff, that's a bit different on a constitutional basis, because race as an evaluation of someone's ability to participate in educational programs and things was explicitly written in to Title VI of the Constitution, whereas I'm deciding to give someone an in as a private institution or even a public institution because of their donations or something. There's nothing in the law that says, as far as I know, that says thou shalt not give someone an advantage for a donation. So if you want to get rid of legacy admissions, if you want to show that it's counter to either the law or the spirit of the law or something else and bring it up to the Supreme Court, hey, go for it. I'm all for it. And so with the guy, what they didn't say in that article is that when asked about legacy admissions, Bloom, the guy that brought the case before the Supreme Court on affirmative action, said, yeah, Harvard should get rid of legacy admissions. They've refused to do so. But we don't want to talk about that, I guess.
Well, no, I guess not.
But anyway, now we're going to learn from Forbes the 3 ways, or 4 ways, because I can read, and apparently Forbes can't count, to improve and preserve progress in the workplace. Are you ready, tail feature, to learn something?
I'm always ready to learn. And I'm always ready to immediately forget that information. Or face palm first and then immediately forget. I go, oh, that's and then it's gone.
Yes, I've continued that tradition with my Gallic lessons.
Well, me too,
anyway.
actually.
Oh man, we should do it. We should do a round 2 at some point.
Yes, I'm a little bit better than I was back then. So,
understanding the current climate, education, and awareness. Okay. It is incumbent upon each of us to understand the significance of the Supreme Court's ruling and how it will influence our work environment. Again, I have to ask, when did affirmative action ever apply to private business? When? I know, exactly. Silent.
I don't know. That's not my area of expertise.
Well, I see. But I've been listening to this stuff and reading articles on it for years now, and I've always wondered, okay, where is the law that says affirmative action, which applies only to colleges and universities and their admissions policies, how does that somehow quasi-magically extend a legal cover to a private institution to have race or gender quotas in their hiring practices? How does that happen? What is the alchemy that leads to that outcome? And I've never seen anybody quote anything that answers that question. And especially now when the articles have been coming out like this one that actually acknowledges that DEI has a direct link, at least in justification, to affirmative action. I've yet to see somebody say, due to this ruling or this case, DEI enjoys the privileges of affirmative action. Never had that explained to me. Anyway, while it's true that this ruling applies to institutions of higher education and not workplaces, thank you, Forbes. I didn't even read that line. Thank you. It sets a broader legal precedent that could trickle down to influence company DEI policies. I would love for them to explain to me how affirmative action before this trickled down to influence DEI policies.
Anyway. DEI it doesn't trickle. It has tentacles.
Yes. Yeah. It
infects everything it touches. So.
Yeah. As far as I can tell, and this is just, sort of my interpretation over the years, it's that because affirmative action existed, because affirmative action as a notion was allowed to take place in colleges, it kind of gave everybody a sort of sense that there was room to maneuver on this stuff, and that fundamentally there was some kind of gray area in our country's principles or legality of what you could or could not do. And that they just made it up, essentially. They just made up some kind of justification for this based on the existence of affirmative action. But now that that's been taken away, that's what I've been curious to see what will happen. All this other stuff. Building greater awareness through education is a crucial tool to combat bias, ignorance, and prejudice. Yes. This is the moment for employee resource groups. Hey, ERGs, yay! DEI councils and HR leaders to step in and educate their organizations on the historic reasons for affirmative action, its impact, and why DEI efforts are essential. The historic reasons for affirmative action were found to be unconstitutional. Are you going to mention that part?
Whoops.
Yeah. According to, McKinsey, God, I tell you what, McKinsey is like the go-to polling organization for anybody that wants to justify their nonsense. According to McKinsey's 2020 report, companies in the top quartile for ethnic and cultural diversity were 36% more likely to have financial returns above their respective national industry medians. Oh, Okay, so recruit people on the basis of their skin color for profit. Let me think about that for a second.
Is that not exploitative or some other socialist buzzword?
Yeah, can we think of any other historical examples where a race motivation for profit didn't really go that well for people at one point or another?
I mean, it went very well for some people.
Well, that's true. That's true. Some people profited very much on that. I wonder what those people look like in this example. This demonstrates that DEI isn't just ethical. Wait, what? Wait, where's the ethical part? You just gave us the mercenary part. This demonstrates that DEI isn't just ethical, it's also a business imperative. I would love to see how you arrived at those numbers, McKinsey. I wonder if even McKinsey would say in their report, if it's not in some kind of footnote somewhere, if they would say explicitly that racial and ethnic diversity, ethnic and cultural diversity, we don't say race here, we say ethnic and cultural. That's always interesting. Directly is a direct link to profitability. Diversity also contributes to a more inclusive and equitable culture, leading to higher employee satisfaction and retention rates. According to a survey by Glassdoor, isn't Glassdoor like an online reporting thing?
I've never heard of them, I'm afraid.
Yeah. By Glassdoor, 67% of job seekers consider workplace diversity an important factor when considering job offers. Okay. Moreover, organizations that embrace diversity are better equipped to understand and cater to diverse customer and community bases, resulting in stronger relationships.
So essentially, our diversity, equity, and inclusion experts, they're the ones that can see all the issues, and so they're the ones that make the place better equipped to deal with these things, because they are the ones that are, spotting these problems that only they can see, because it's all magic, really, at the end of the day.
Well, it's only they can see because they know that if someone is of color X, then they're going to have problem Y, obviously, right?
Or racist to me.
Oh, yeah, we're not monolithing anybody here. We're not saying that, oh, well, we have this many of this type of person here. That means that the demographic of our community is therefore represented, because they all think alike, obviously. Building bridges. Okay, that was our education and awareness. Okay. Building bridges, allyship. According to data from the U.S. Department of Labor, white women have made significant strides with their representation in professional and managerial roles, nearly doubling over the past 3 decades. Well, how could that be, patriarchy? You're failing. Dang it. I thought all us men were just like always going to get the good stuff. Dang.
Apparently, their plan must be working then.
Yeah, or I mean, you know what it is. I mean, we're just taking pity on the ladies. That's all it really is. Let's be honest.
That's gynocentrism in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's patriarchy in action that women are doing well. That's the thing. Yes. We're trying to build up their confidence, make them feel better while we're still controlling them. Yeah. In this moment, the biggest benefactor of affirmative action, white women, must step up and use their privilege to advocate for others and be instrumental in maintaining workplace progress. Wait, the biggest benefactor of affirmative action is white women?
Yeah, I saw that being bandied around over the last few days.
Because NPR just told me it was Black and Latino people that were benefiting the most from affirmative action.
I thought that they were the ones who are meant to be aimed at the most, or something like that. All this stuff had to be aimed to trying to hire more people like them. But actually, white women are taking advantage of affirmative action somehow, because they're too high on the progressive stack, and they should still give up their places in place of a black woman or whatever.
Well, here's something else. If white women are the biggest benefactors of affirmative action, how do they have privilege? I mean, you'd think that they wouldn't even factor into affirmative action because I'm confused, everyone.
Well, I mean, when did any of this make any logical, consistent
No. Tailed. This, no. What they're saying has to be true because it's from a publication.
Sorry,
I'm in the wrong. I'm obviously in the wrong because my confuzzlement. That's my problem.
Well, yes, because logic is a patriarchal construct.
Yes,
we're just on the wrong wavelength compared to these people.
This is true. We are definitely vibrating at a different frequency. It is not enough to empathize with individuals from marginalized groups. So someone who is from a marginalized group, I have to empathize with because they're from a marginalized group. Oh, okay. All right. It involves taking active steps to support them. Oh, because obviously they need support and they need empathy because of the demographic, not group. Unless you actually mean group, unless you're actually thinking of demographics as groups, unless you're actually thinking of them as monoliths by default, which I assume you are. But whenever I see group and they're talking about demographics, they're two different things. You know, a group has a banner, a group has a membership card.
I mean, you can have a demographic group.
Mm-hmm.
Well, although I suppose that's a bit of a tautology.
A little bit. It involves taking active steps to support them. This includes calling out discriminatory behavior. You mean like assuming someone is in need of my help because of what they're... Okay. Advocating for policies that promote diversity or helping to ensure opportunities are equally accessible to everyone. Oh.
I mean, that's a bad thing, I would say. But then, you know, I'm a straight white man.
Right.
I would say having opportunities for everyone or giving those opportunities to people based on immutable characteristics is not necessarily the best way to go about things. But then, as I say, I'm just a sexist, homophobic, racist, transphobe, whatever.
Yes. Well, the shorthand for that is Scotsman.
Well, I mean,
no, actually, given the SNP, probably not.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, there are plenty of people who, yeah.
Effective allyship can help to create a more inclusive corporate culture, something that is increasingly important given that 83% of millennials are actively engaged when they believe their organization fosters an inclusive culture, according to Deloitte's 2020 Global Millennial Survey. Yes, I do agree. Millennials have been corralled into thinking a certain way about things with today's media landscape and cultural zeitgeist, and especially the colleges and educational institutions that have.
What are you defining as millennial?
What's the age range for that? It's like, isn't anybody born just before or just after the millennium?
Well, I thought it was 1981 to 1999 was what I had in my head.
Is that what millennium is? I thought that was Gen X.
Maybe we have a different metric in the UK.
I don't know.
We're obviously doing it in metric. You're doing it in imperial or something like that.
That could be so. Maybe I'm off. Off.
No. Well, I don't know. I think people bandy the term around a bit too loosely as well. I generally think that, millennial. I'm a millennial, and then Gen Z or Z or whatever is after that. That's what I would say.
Well, so depending on who you are, millennial goes from, and thank you, chat, anywhere from 82 to 88 to 99 to 2000, something like that. So somewhere in that early 80s to 2000 range.
If these people are also using that, I would doubt their statistics.
I was born just on the tail end of the Gen X range, I guess, 1979. So, but also I was raised by parents who were at least a decade behind in having children because of medical issues. So I was raised under a completely different mindset than probably my peers of the same generation. But anyway, moving on. One area where
I'm
white
just backward.
Well, obviously, I mean, you're not agreeing with the stuff that people say is right.
Exactly.
We're all backwards. Yeah. One area where white women are well positioned to step into allyship, HR and DEI roles. Women in human resources. I thought that was a sexist stereotype. Nearly 70% of HR professionals and over 70% of DEI leaders are white women. Oh, it wasn't a stereotype. It's actually true. Okay.
It's almost like stereotypes have some truth to them.
Yeah, there's some grain of truth behind some stereotypes. By leveraging their positions and influence, white women in these key roles can advocate for equitable hiring practices. So what you're saying is white women in HR can use their explicit bias to continue DEI activities even in the face of the Supreme Court ruling. Implement inclusive policies and foster an environment where everyone's voices are heard and valued. Yes, but valued on what basis? It is only through collective efforts and support for DEI that organizations can truly thrive and create spaces where everyone has equal opportunities to succeed. Why do you need
say the quiet bits out loud, aren't they?
Well, it's like, okay, so you want white women to use their power to continue DEI practices, yet you want equal opportunities for success. But you want them to put their thumbs on the scales with their power, but you want equal opportunities.
Well, putting your thumbs on the scales, gives opportunities to, I don't know, fat people.
Oh no!
So sorry, what? People of size. Sorry,
people of carriage. I heard, so there was an episode of The Simpsons way back when Homer decided he was going to get fat and live off of disability, right?
Is that the one where he gets like what would you call it, like a shawl type thing because he can't?
Yeah, he gets his moo-moo. Yeah, he gets his moo-moo.
Yeah.
And of course Bart's dreaming about being fat as well, and said, "I wash myself with a rag on a stick."
Oh yes. Been a long time, but yes.
Yeah. So, but anyway, somewhere in there, Homer's trying to do something like get into a restaurant or get on a plane or something, and the official there kind of comes up to him very polite and says, "Sir, I'm afraid we're not equipped to handle someone of your carriage." And I just always thought that was the most snooty frou-frou way to refer to it, but it's hilarious when you say it. So anyway,
that was a niche reference essentially.
Yeah, very exactly. This is my brain and trivia and ridiculous useless knowledge, which I wish I could put my powers for retention of knowledge towards something productive. But here I am. Standing up advocacy. Organizations are built on the values and beliefs of its people. Unless your values and beliefs are in tune with the Constitution, in that case, just get out. Oh, sorry, I put that part in. Each one of us plays a role in shaping the culture of our organizations. Our ability to take action or mulch. What?
Mulch.
Our ability to take action or mulch in indifference. I have not heard that word used in that way before, I don't think.
I thought mulch was the stuff that you put down on top of soil to give it nutrients.
I think it's both a noun and a verb, because mulching is sort of like when you combine and sort of like.
Oh yeah.
That's my understanding. So I think it could be both.
Does it mean sort of like bask in this sense? Just
marinate?
Yeah, just.
I'd use marinate, I think, than mulch. But anyway, action or mulch in
lazy. Basically,
there you go. That's it. Lounge casually. Our ability to take action or mulch in indifference is what creates either a thriving climate for DEI or one that maintains the status quo. Employees need to take on the roles of advocates for diversity and inclusion within their organizations. This involves voicing concerns about policies or practices that might be discriminatory. So if I complain about DEI, I'm actually advocating in favor of DEI. Is that it?
It's Kafka traps all the way down.
Good gravy. Okay, this involves voicing concerns about policies or practices that might be discriminatory or disadvantageous to marginalized groups and pushing for initiatives that enhance diversity and foster inclusion. Okay, so discriminatory or disadvantageous, to marginalized groups. Okay, not just people, but specific. Okay. In the wake of the Supreme Court's ruling, advocacy can help ensure that the diversity and inclusion conversation stays alive and continues to be prioritized. The power of collective voices cannot be underestimated. Again, why does a ruling against affirmative action have any effect on DEI policies? I want them to explain why they are so scared about this, because one has absolutely nothing to do with the other legally.
Well,
I know there's not really an answer to that one.
They are terrified because if it's not in policy and if it's not in law, then people tend to look at these ideas and go, I don't think that's great.
Well, the biggest pitfall for DEI is that first letter, because the argument for affirmative action was based around the diversity argument. And I know I'm repeating myself for those of you that listened to the previous streams, but if you listen to the oral arguments from last October, where the lawyers defending Harvard and UNC were talking about why affirmative action is necessary, what its benefits are to the colleges and so on, the same phrases, the same justifications, the same rhetoric has been used for DEI corporate policies and promotional videos and debates and panel discussions, at least as long as I've been doing my channel. Part and parcel, exactly the same. The justifications for affirmative action are the justifications for DEI, and the Supreme Court just threw out the diversity argument as justifying a racial test within an organization effectively. I mean, specifically for colleges, but you can't use that line anymore as something that can't now be legally challenged under Supreme Court ruling. That's why they're scared, because they got nothing. They didn't have any legal basis to begin with, but they certainly have none now. And so some of the articles we were looking at previously, Tailed, were talking about how in some secret corporate meetings ahead of the court's decision, they were actually considering what they could do to try to mitigate the damage by taking away the word diversity from their programs and finding some other way to brand themselves to avoid any legal liability or complications. Because diversity is no longer a saving grace.
I mean, will they just change the terminology again?
That'd be the first. So the first step seems to be like what has happened in the last several days, and sometimes within the same day. Warner Brothers, the Academy Awards, Netflix, Disney, all of them have dropped their DEI executives on the basis of restructuring. And that restructuring, I think, is going to be first and foremost, like you say, a rebranding of the language to try to avoid any lines drawn between DEI and affirmative action being abolished, but also downplaying their importance, still having them in some way, shape, or form present as an office or as a department in their companies, because they have to have it on their prospectus and on their investment reports, because that's all feeding into the whole ESG scoring system for loans and financial support from institutions, because that's still a big thing, even if it's might be dying on the vine. But yeah, they're going to have to overhaul this stuff because A, it's legally treacherous. B, these things have never shown to have any return on investment. Yeah, it's all negatives now, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. I mean, even culturally is probably actually where we've lost out the most, I would argue.
Yeah. No, affirmative action and the whole sentiment around it has perpetuated the acceptability of assessing people on the basis of race. Even if you're not a college or anything else, as long as big institutions get to push this idea, it seems acceptable in the radiation from that policy. And in that wise, I'm very glad the court finally said something decisive on it, because as far as I can tell, it was the last legal racially discriminatory practice in this country that was on paper said, yes, you can use race to assess somebody's value. So anyway, not to get too far afield, in recent years, there has been a notable surge in organizing and unionizing efforts within corporate America. Even white-collar workers have been actively participating in these movements. Prominent examples include companies like Amazon and Starbucks, where employees have organized to address issues related to fair wages, working conditions, and employee representation. Employee representation. I didn't know they were voted in. These instances demonstrate that advocacy efforts are not limited to specific industries or job types, but are increasingly becoming vehicles for advocating for DEI principles and ensuring fair treatment and representation across all levels of the workforce. The Supreme Court's ruling against affirmative action underscores the complexity of achieving diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. It's not that complex. You guys just pick people on the basis of what they are. It's actually the least complex process by which to populate your workforce. Are you this color?
Right? That's not strictly true. They have to have the same politics as well, or at least feign that.
Oh, there's that too. Yeah, very much so. At least keep quiet about anything that might go against the grain. Although, again, in most workplaces, politics shouldn't even be something you bring up anyway, but whatever. But yeah, but if you don't look the part, if you're not the right gender, if you're not the right orientation, or, you know, and here's the one that they never bring up. And I've always made this point. They never bring up religion, right? That's always like of all the things, that's the most taboo to even get close to bringing up, even though religion under the Constitution is on the exact same equal footing as race and gender when it comes to those things thou shalt not discriminate against. But they never talk about religion in diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's always ethnicity, background, race, orientation.
That's because DEI is a religion.
Well, I guess I can't have too many competition.
Of which you need to be an adherent.
However, this decision should be seen not as a roadblock, but as a call to action. By committing to education and awareness, ally and advocacy, we can play a pivotal role in shaping a diverse, inclusive, and equitable world of work landscape, no matter the roadblocks the legal landscape presents. So even if the law says you can't do this, we'll find a way, guys. Is that really no matter the roadblocks, the legal land? Okay, can you imagine if this was something somebody put out as a response to the Civil Rights Act? Like, you know, I used to put a sign up in front of my store that said whites only, but now these lawyers are saying I can't. Well, I'll find a way around that roadblock. That's amazing. That is amazing. How long can you stick around, dude? I want to keep you.
However long you want, really. Well, I mean,
no. However long you want.
No more. Well, I'll need. I should probably go and make some dinner in around half an hour. I think
Okay. Well, I'm going to be going. I got at least 4 or 5 other articles I'm going through. So at whatever point you need to split, just say the word. I'm not meaning to keep you on any longer.
Sure.
But there was our first article from Forbes. Let's go on to article number 2. And before I dive into that, I'll remind again for anybody who's just shown up or otherwise still here, please take a look at the link at the top of the chat box or the link in the description if you're watching in the future to the Gary Sinise Foundation that services the veterans of this country. And on this 4th of July, if you consider donating there, it'd be very much appreciated. If you can't donate, please consider sharing that link out on social media. Very much appreciated. I'll take a second here and go to the chat because this is the intermission between articles. Scrappy, AA was part of all government hiring and promotion way beyond just universities. Even subcontractors had to adhere to that law to have funding. Except that affirmative action doesn't apply to anything other than universities and institutions, educational institutions. But the idea of it was adopted by several companies and sectors of the country, banks especially. When you get lending institutions that start seeing diversity, equity, and inclusion as a necessity for who they're going to work with or invest in, and then take their inspiration from affirmative action in making those kind of calls, and then companies go along with it because otherwise, well, if we don't do this, we're not going to be considered worthy of being invested in. You get this whole trickle-down effect, and it's all poison. So companies and states and organizations have continued pushing this idea that, we have to first assess what is the person versus what can the person do. And we have to invest in this kind of business because it's run by these kind of people. I'm hoping this is all going to go by the wayside eventually, and that, you know, because all the affirmative action decision does is just give people the opportunity to pursue other legal action against institutions that would start using this stuff or have been using this stuff in some kind of weird legal, fog. And now they can say you don't have any cover, either culturally or rhetorically, it's out the window. So really the real work to be done, if we're going to see any, is going to come in the next months and years as this decision fuels other decisions and other lawsuits and other changes and things. So let's see what else. We got Mr. Tickertrunk. I'm asking, you guys are having conversations amongst yourselves. I appreciate that amongst you guys. You have your own little community going on in the chat. Occasionally, I'd like to be the center of attention. That's okay. I'm just kidding. Let's see. Scrappy, wrong. You don't get funding from FedGov if you don't adhere to the law. Okay, maybe I'm missing something. How does affirmative action, or when did affirmative action become a law that a private institution had to adhere to in order to get government funding? I mean, I'm not asking like a sarcastic way. It's like I've been asking effectively this question for years now. How does affirmative action apply to private enterprise? If there are some other laws or policies or something out there that give incentives to companies to make hiring decisions on the basis of race or gender or otherwise, well, then that's something else that needs to be taken care of. But anyway, let's see. Genti Maxi. Well, it makes sense. If affirmative action got you into Harvard with shit scores and you passed Harvard with shit scores, hey, they're going to make you hire them too with the shit scores. Yeah. It all kind of feeds into each other, doesn't it? Let's see. AA began on FedGov positional hiring long before it even applied to universities. Well, yeah, but what is the law? Not the policy, not some kind of like, but what is under law, under written law? Because if some kind of cultural or understated or just precedent or not technically legally, but it's sort of an accepted policy, what law allowed that? And with affirmative action and its arguments gone by the wayside, I would hope that puts those kind of policies or that kind of rhetoric on the chopping block as well. But I guess again, we'll see what things happen as we go forward. Anyway, another article from Forbes. 4 ways the Supreme Court's affirmative action decision could impact workplace DEI. Let's see. Is this... Did I just put up the same article twice? Sorry. I just want to make sure I didn't. No, the first one, this was true. Okay.
This one's 2 pages shorter, I think.
Yeah, and this one is why the Supreme Court's affirmative action ruling is a danger for DEI efforts. This is a different take, same subject. It's not the same author, is it? Hold on. No. Okay. Just want to make sure.
It's just written in the same jargonistic way.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll compare and contrast 2 different authors at the same publication talking about the same subject and see how much crossover we see. All right, 4 ways it could impact workplace DEI. The U.S. Supreme Court announced on Thursday it has struck down the long-standing affirmative action practice within college and university admissions, with the court ruling 6-3 that race-based admissions policies are unconstitutional. Despite mounting evidence that indicates that affirmative action programs have actually served to increase racial diversity within higher education, I don't dispute that. I don't dispute that at all, because if your only goal is to massage the quotient of races in your population, yeah, valuing race really does do that.
Yes, the implication is that as a benefit by default.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an inherent good.
Yes.
Despite mounting evidence, there's been evidence of that. Okay, California outlawed.
We know that giving people of color more opportunity to get into these things will result in more people of color being in these things. It's kind of
I don't. Despite mounting evidence.
Yes, the mounting evidence that we are letting more black people in, therefore there are more black people in.
I find this truth to be self-evident. Another way to put it. Critics have claimed affirmative action programs somehow disadvantage white applicants, causing reverse racism. That's not the argument. That is not the argument.
Isn't a thing. It's just racism.
Yeah. You don't. Yeah, it's not like a stick shift. Okay, it's just a thing. The court's decision will likely have trickle-down effects within corporate America. Why? Again, I have to ask. How was it ever applicable to corporate America in the first place? The court's decision will likely have trickle-down effects within corporate America, and some states have already started to push back against diversity policies. Okay, how could the Supreme Court's decision impact workplace diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, efforts moving forward? You're leaving out the B. You're really trying to push the belonging part. And I still think it should be called DEBI, Debbie, because that'd be great. They could have a little mascot and everything. Widening racial disparities in hiring. Does a disparity inherently indicate an inequity? I always ask that question. Workplace affirmative action programs have been instrumental in increasing the number of women and underrepresented racial groups, according to research. I believe you. There have been corporate efforts to defund DEI programs because of financial concerns within many industries. Those are two completely different notions right there. But here's a question. Why? Why have they been defunding them? Is it because they don't actually bring in any extra money? Is there actually no basis on which to say that bringing in people that look a particular way automatically increases our profits?
That's capitalism. It's not making money, so it will not throw money at it.
Despite best laid plans within many industries, there is pervasive evidence that many workplaces engage in bogus and performative DEI efforts. It's all performative. It's all a check mark now. I mean, company like I said before, like Goldman Sachs, just as an example, and this is just the most egregious example I did a video on a couple of years ago now. Goldman Sachs stated that they would no longer work with companies that did not have at least one woman on their board of directors. Okay. Now, Goldman Sachs is one of the biggest investment banks on the planet, if not the biggest investment bank on the planet. So if you're a company and you want to have access to Goldman Sachs's money, and they say you have to have at least one woman on your board of directors, and you don't currently have a woman on your board of directors, or if there's a law in California that says thou shalt have at least X percentage of women on your board of directors, what are you going to do to both follow the law and get the money? You're going to perform as told. So of course it's performative. If you don't have a DEI program, some companies won't work with you. And so it's a checkbox. And this is their own fault. They've turned it from some kind of like moral good and cultural benefit to you must have at least the veneer of conforming to this to get anywhere.
Yeah, it's you have it's almost like, well, we put these rules and this precedent in place, this cultural precedent in place. Oh no, some people aren't actually taking it seriously and are just doing it to jump on the bandwagon, or because they feel like it's necessary, to actually achieve what they want to achieve because we've put these roadblocks in place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's all nonsense.
I'd be curious to know our author, if they could. What would they do, or what would they require for a company to prove that their DEI program is not performative? Like, what would you have to do? What kind of attitude? What kind of ritual would you have to do?
Doing it hard enough. That tends to be what happens. They go, oh, this DEI stuff isn't working in this particular instance. Well, we're obviously not doing it hard enough. We'll just double down.
Evidence that many workplaces engage in bogus and performative DEI efforts. Many companies may now be less inclined to address racial and ethnic disparities in their talent pool. Disparities. Okay, well, how would our author suggest someone address a racial disparity in their talent pool? And then please look to Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 regarding employment opportunities and race. What would our speaker, our author here, what would she or I don't even know, he or she say about trying to get around the Constitution in order to address racial disparities, not inequities, but simply a statistical disparity. By what mechanism would you resolve this problem? Could it be racial discrimination? Anyway, the impact of workplace diversity is far-reaching, and workplaces that ignore this will not remain competitive or sustainable. Prove it. Prove that being competitive or sustainable is intrinsic. That's the word I was looking for. My brain went that profitability, competitiveness, sustainability is intrinsic to the color of the people in your workforce. By all means, draw that line. Show me that proof. Challenges with retaining underrepresented talent. A failure to hire employees from underrepresented racial groups will affect retention of these same groups.
Again, that seems to be a self-evident truth.
Well, or again, if you think of everybody as a monolith, if I don't see someone that looks like me, obviously I need to get out of this place because either I'm racist or they're racist.
Yeah, I was going to say that's one less racist at your company. It sounds like a win-win to me.
A 2021 article from Great Place to Work, there's not even okay, never heard of it, indicates a 2021 article from something that I've never heard of before that indicates that in companies that promote diversity and inclusion, employee retention rates are 5.4 times higher. Okay. So one study indicates, all right, no one wants to work in an environment where they are, quote, the only, unquote. I mean, if your worldview is race-based first, then I guess that could be a problem for you.
It's kind of true, because I don't want to work in an environment where I am the only non-follower of DEI or the only person who believes in meritocracy or the only non-socialist or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
What if you were in a workplace and you were the only Scotsman? You were the only person that sounded like you.
I'd be fine with that. I'd probably get quite a bit of attention.
Wait a second. No. You'd be the only. You'd be unique.
Sorry. I mean, I would. I don't know. I'd have to change my accent to fit in or something, I guess.
No. You'd have to quit or demand that they hire Scots.
Oh yes.
It's the only way. It's the only way you could ever feel good about yourself is if you were surrounded by people who were similar to you. And the company would be doing you a disservice if they weren't hiring people to make you feel better about not being the only one of your kind.
Yes, there are enough
even as I say it, I just... Oh my gosh. Having a revolving door of talent is much more costly for an organization than being able to retain, grow, and develop the talent that you already have. Except you're not focused on talent in these policies. And if you have a problem with retention, could it be that you're hiring people not on the basis of what they can do, but what they look like, and personal merit and ability and skill is at best a secondary consideration? Isn't there more risk there when you're talking about a workplace environment? Decentering racial and ethnic diversity in your workplace will not only make it more challenging to retain the employees you already have, but it will likely be more difficult to attract new talent from underrepresented communities. This assumes that everybody is a racist. Right? I mean, what else? Yeah. What else is supposed to conclude from that? It's like, well, if I don't see someone who looks like me here, then I have to leave because obviously I don't feel like I belong. That says more about me than it does about the company and the people around me.
Indeed.
A lack of inclusive design. Okay. In workplaces where there is a lack of racial and ethnic diversity, the products and services that are created are less likely to be inclusive of varying communities and populations. Are you going to talk about women and pockets and jeans and things, or?
It's 2016 all over again.
I know. An example of this. An example of this in January of 2020, Robert Julian Borchak Williams. Whoa, that's a name. Was wrongfully arrested by the Detroit Police Department after a facial recognition algorithm falsely identified Williams as the perpetrator of a crime.
If only they had more black people making that technology, it wouldn't have happened or something.
The 2021 Artificial Intelligence Index report, indicates that in 2019, only 2.4% of U.S. residents with artificial intelligence PhDs were Black. Okay, it's
no,
fair
they are actually making the argument.
Wow.
I was talking about.
It's fair to assume that if there were more Black people working in AI, there would be better detection and more strategies to mitigate these racial disparities.
I mean, I'm no expert on AI, but I don't think that's how it works.
I don't think that's how it works either. Besides which, I think, and people in the chat can correct me, I did a TEDx, 2 or 3 weeks ago, where this very thing came up. And even the speaker at the TEDx, who was using this facial recognition deal as an example of why you need diversity in the workplace, et cetera, even she had to admit that the accuracy rate of these programs have improved year over year. And I'm like, well, why would they? If the whole point of this is to be racially discriminatory against people, why would they bother trying to make it better and more accurate?
And also, does it not necessarily mean that it's going to, target white people more if it better recognizes white people?
I know. So it's really accurate against white people.
Yeah, that's racist or something.
Yeah. Failing to prioritize racial diversity in your organization means that the products and services that are created may lack the inclusive design that would make them usable for a larger population. It depends on what we're talking about. If I decide to use a man as my body model for building a dress that's going to go on a woman, that would probably be a bad idea. And there's actually one really good active example about this in a way. And it's been brought up a couple of times in the past, and I've always found it to be the most compelling, is car safety. How in car crash tests for decades and decades and decades, the crash dummies used were almost exclusively of a male body shape and weight and everything else. And even if you had a child-sized one, it was still in the body shape and the effective construction of a male sort of figure. And it was just assumed that, the results of this crash test will affect people in this way. Until they decided, what if we put a female-shaped crash test dummy in there? What if we put a pregnant-shaped crash test dummy in there? Then what happens? And then they found out, whoops, there's a whole bunch of places we can improve in order to protect somebody's life and well-being if we actually take into account biological differences between the genders. And that was one of the most effective arguments in my mind of diversity in thinking regarding gender or body shape or something that's tangible in that way is actually a decent argument. So if you're talking about like the mechanical differences between the genders, because there is sexual dimorphism, or if you're assessing body shapes, things like that, things that are like reasonable and on the temporal plane, then sure. But this idea here, again, promulgates the idea that skin color indicates ways of thinking, that gender inherently indicates ways of thinking about things or about products or something else. Maybe there's some crossover, maybe there's some argument there, depending on what we're talking about. But just assuming that, and especially we're talking about racial diversity. Anyway, I could go on. Workplace inequities will continue to persist. All right, do you mean inequity or disparity? Affirmative action was designed to address the historic marginalization that different racial groups have experienced. Yes. Ending efforts to remedy and rectify this issue doesn't mean the problem will go away. These issues will likely intensify over time. And like I've said since the decision came up, when do we draw the line? If affirmative action was meant, and in its most sort of road to hell's paved with good intentions assessment, if it was meant to try to, after the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and in recognition of decades, if not a century of legal discrimination against certain demographics in this country, that led to unavoidable disparities in outcomes for education and wealth attainment and such, if it was meant to address that and to try to right the wrongs of the past in some way for the future generations, okay, sounds like a very moral and noble goal. But if its main mechanism was using race as a value factor, when do we stop doing that? How long do we continue with a policy that is antithetical to the principles of this country and the law as written in order to try to correct a wrong that can never be corrected fully. When do we draw the line? As far as the case law went, as far as the affirmative action thing went, in Grutter, the Grutter decision, the court postulated that 25 years from the point of that decision, it would probably be okay to get rid of affirmative action, which in our timeline would be 2028. But the Supreme Court last week essentially said there's no reason to give it another 4 years, 5 years, because the same argument's going to be the same then as it is now. When do we stop doing this? And yeah, exactly. There never be because history will always be the history that it is. And so on that basis, there's never a good time to get rid of it, if that is your argument, if that's your justification for it. Because bad things were done in the past, policies in the past were terrible, we have to continue this fighting fire with fire thing until what? What is the end point? And that's the other problem the court had with affirmative action, is that the proponents of affirmative action couldn't articulate when do you reach that goal? By what metric can a court measure the success of this program? They could never give you like, oh, well, this is the target percentage, or this is what it is, because that inherently conflicts with other law. So if there's no way to assess its success, you can't just keep it in place on the hope that it'll someday achieve an unknown endpoint. Anyway, sorry for going off on that, but this stuff just... See, it really helps. And to everybody in the chat and otherwise, it really helps to read the actual decision from the court. And you can tell very quickly when you read articles from people writing about it who has and has actually read the decision. It's very useful, especially when you hear your own president saying things that are bonkers, but I guess that shouldn't be that much of a surprise these days. Organizations that don't address racial disparities in hiring may also be less likely to tackle these disparities in other areas of the workplace, like promotion and advancement. That is true, I suppose, if you're only looking at which number is larger than the other one. Corporate America must be vigilant against repeated attempts to set the country's progress back. How is affirmative action not setting things backwards?
Because it's the opposite of the discrimination that was in place before.
It was good discrimination. It was benevolent discrimination.
Right.
Despite the Supreme Court's conservative majority, who will ultimately play a pivotal role in the future of the country, we cannot be deterred. I really wish you would be. We each have the power to use our voices to impact change. Yeah, as author Rennie Edo Lodge once wrote, quote, "Every voice raised against racism chips away at its power. We can't afford to stay silent." Well, you're right. And the court has spoken, the Constitution has spoken, and racism, at least institutional racism, literal institutional racism, has been chipped away. DEI defenders, do not be discouraged by the onslaught of criticism and condemnation that seems to be growing louder. Although disappointing, the fight for equity, justice, and liberation must continue. So this wasn't so much an article of fact as a call to action.
It just reads like an opinion piece anyway.
She's a senior contributor. Editor's pick. Okay, so this is the kind of thing that...
Sorry, editor's pick. Do you think she was picked because of her certain characteristics? Is that affirmative action? Is this affirmative action the publication? Is that what this is?
No. This is DEI in practice. I have to assume.
That's what I have to
assume that. Yeah, exactly. I have to assume that Forbes, by this declaration and this editor's pick, is a DEI workplace. So. Let's move on to another one. I think you're coming up on your time, aren't you? I don't want to.
Yeah, if this is another article, probably good.
Yeah, I've got this one and 3 more afterwards for my little marathon here. So
nice one. I'll continue listening, but contributing less, as all good white people should.
Yes. Keep your ears open and your mouth shut. And you'll be fine.
Exactly.
Tailed Feature, thank you so much for joining me on this. It's really nice to talk to you. Everybody, again, if you haven't checked out Tailed stuff, go check out Tailed Feature and look out for regional variations. I think that's every Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken.
We moved Thursday
you did?
a month ago, yes.
Oh, my apologies.
No, that's fine. You're maybe not aware of that. But yes, Thursdays at 9 p.m. British time. That's it, basically.
Okay. And also check out Scottish Feature, his other channel for all things Scottish. If it's not Scottish, it's crap.
There should be new music. Well, it's a cover, but it's as I tend to do. I can't write my own stuff because I'm not very good at that. But it's something for the 40th anniversary of Metallica's first album, which I'm doing on. I'm currently working on a Metallica cover, but with a twist. I'll just put it that way.
And there's also, is it on, I think it's either on Scottish Feature or Tail Feature, obviously, but when you did your medley of opening
Black
riffs.
Sabbath medley.
Yeah, Black Sabbath. Yeah, if you guys have any interest in Black Sabbath, Tail did an incredible medley of opening riffs of was it every Black Sabbath song?
Well, it was meant to be. I kind of missed out a couple by accident. Oops, but yes, it's about 20 minutes long of just a riff from every Black Sabbath song. Other than the ones I forgot about. It was a huge undertaking, and that was really the only reason that I started my second channel. So if you want to go and check it out, feel free.
Yeah, go check it out, and I'll try to remember. And if somebody in the chat can remind me too before. That I will put Tail's links in the description after the show for reference. But go check them out, guys. Tailed, thank you so much for joining me. It was really nice to talk to you on this Independence Day. Yay!
Always a pleasure, and enjoy the rest of your Independence Day, you ungrateful colonial.
That's right. And you go back to your haggis, you empirical jerkwad.
I wish I was having haggis. That'd be amazing right now. Yeah, I'm culturally appropriating tonight's meal. So,
well, you are white.
Yeah, exactly. It's what I do. But yes, I will.
The sun never sets on our cultural appropriation.
Exactly. So yes, well, thank you for having me on. Next time, if there's a little bit of notice, I might be able to contribute a little bit more, but maybe that's
you're fine.
Rather than just being off the cuff, but we should organize something sometime.
Yes, we should get organization. Yes, a collective effort towards something beneficial. Yes. All right, dude. We'll have a good dinner.
Yeah.
And a good night, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Good night, guys. See you later.
Yep. Bye, Tail. So nice to talk to him. I miss Tail. It's one of those things where it's months or weeks can go in between us talking or chatting about anything, and it all comes right back. I think Tail was one of my first live stream guests. Way back in the archives, there was one of my first live streams was something called Scribe Feature a Tailed Light or something like that. We've done that a couple of times, and I'm so happy to have a chance to talk to him. Anyway, again, just to remind so I don't forget, the top of the chat box in the description, there's a link to the Gary Sinise Foundation to help support our veterans, especially on this 4th of July, Independence Day. So please take a look at that and donate if you can. If you can't, that's fine, but please think about sharing that link out on social media. It'd be very much appreciated. Yes, and Tail says, I remember that. Yeah, I know. It's like a long, long time ago. All right, let's get on to our next article. This one comes from the Catalyst blog. And at first I thought this was in association with Change Catalyst, which was the organization that our past Sunday stream subject, Melinda Epler, ran. But I'm wondering if maybe they changed their name because this organization was already previously established and was causing some kind of confusion. I don't know. I was just curious why she changed from Change Catalyst to Impovia. But either way, does the U.S. Supreme Court decision on affirmative action affect your company's diversity initiatives? Oh boy, NYU legal experts, Kenji Yoshino and David Glasgow. Glasgow? I know something about a Glasgow. I also know something about a Goke-thropple. Answer our question. Sorry, disclaimer. Okay, this blog post is not a substitute for professional legal advice. If you want guidance on what, if any, impact this ruling will have on your own organization's specific DEI practices, please seek advice from your legal counsel. Yes, find a legal counsel who will tell you whether or not you have crossed the line in federal law this entire time under the misunderstood belief that you had some kind of legal cover. Thank you for pronouncing Glasgow correctly. Did I? It was completely by accident, I swear. Completely by accident. In the aftermath of the U.S. Supreme Court decision on race-conscious admissions in higher education, Catalyst is as committed as ever to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. Well, doubling down. All right. We recommend. Okay, but not as a legal thing, right? We recommend that U.S.-based companies continue to focus their DEI efforts on creating an environment where people of all identities and backgrounds can belong. On a practical level, how will this decision, which struck down the race-conscious admissions policies at Harvard and the University of North Carolina, well, it struck down the race-conscious policies at universities and institutions of higher learning in this country, period, because it's the Supreme Court. But anyway, influence the diversity initiatives of private companies. Catalyst reached out to Kenji Yoshino, Chief Justice Earl Warren Professor of Constitutional Law and Faculty Director of NYU Law's Meltzer Center for Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging. Holy cats, what a name, or title, I should say. And David Glasgow, Executive Director of the Meltzer Center. Oh, so both these guys come from the same organization. Okay, for their response. So wait, you got a faculty director who works at a Center for Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging. Where's the equity, first and foremost? And then you got a guy who also works at the same center. You didn't get like one person. If the second guy came from a more neutral think tank, all right, well, you're giving us a skewed viewpoint. Fine, whatever. What will the impact of this decision be on DEI initiatives in the workplace? Okay, doesn't tell us who's speaking here, but I guess it's just the collective. The main initial impact of this decision will be on the candidate pool. Okay. Excuse me. If the students admitted to colleges become less diverse overall, again, how do you define diversity? It follows that the graduate pool for entry-level jobs will also be less diverse. Okay, so again, affirmative action, which does not apply to anything other than universities and colleges. That means that companies, prior to this decision, have been practicing racial discrimination in their candidate recruitment pooling decisions. Because, I mean, again, what was affirmative action about? What was the lawsuit about? It was about using race as a decision point in valuing someone's access to opportunity. Which means, at least by this admission here, that companies are using race to value someone's access to opportunity in the workplace. Tell me again about Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 in those first couple of lines. However, the decision will have little immediate impact on the legality of workplace DEI initiatives themselves for a few reasons. Okay, maybe we'll finally get into what laws have allowed DEI to persist. For starters, the court's decision was about affirmative action in higher education admissions. Yes, not affirmative action in private workplaces. Well, where is the affirmative action in private workplaces law? While the court held that affirmative action violates the Equal Protection Clause in the U.S. Constitution, and by extension, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, it did not hold that affirmative action violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the main statute governing the employment relationship. How does DEI not inherently violate Title VII? What? How does the court's logic in abolishing affirmative action and, right, by saying that it violated Title VI, what part of Title VI did it violate? And how does that not carry over in specifics, if not in spirit, to Title VII. And how was Title VII ever massaged to allow DEI policies in the first place? I mean, affirmative action might have given some weird contradictory cover to colleges and universities to use race as a consideration in educational settings. It never provided cover for private companies and never gave any cover for Title VII. So if affirmative action never applied to Title VI as a result of this ruling, and Title VI is all that was brought up, then it never applied to Title VII. What? It did not hold that affirmative action violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the main statute governing the employment relationship. Well, just wait your turn then, I guess. To end workplace affirmative action, the court would need to overrule two of its long-standing precedents: United Steelworkers versus Weber, 1979, and Johnson v. Transportation Agency, 1987, which authorized affirmative action on Oh my God, 7 frickin' years it took, and somebody finally gave me some legal precedent. Good gravy. Well, okay, my questions have finally been answered. Why has no one ever, in 7 years of looking at panel discussions, corporate presentations, debates, and on and on and on, ever mentioned these two cases? So, affirmative action is legal under Title VII right now, and has been since at least 1979. Well, good gravy. Why didn't somebody say something? Second, most DEI initiatives in the workplace are not affirmative action in the sense addressed in this decision. Did you listen to the lawyers in favor of affirmative action? Because they do not involve employers taking race or other legally protected characteristics into account when making hiring or promotion decisions. Are you dude? Dude, are you kidding me? Wait a second. Wait. If affirmative action is legal under these two cases, then what do you mean they do not involve employers taking race or other legally protected characteristics into account when making hiring or promotion decisions? What is affirmative action except taking those characteristics into account when making decisions? What? No. You can't say that affirmative action in the workplace is authorized under these two precedents and then say that it doesn't count anyway because they don't take those things into consideration. Affirmative action in colleges trumped Title VI, and you're suggesting that affirmative action in the workplace trumps Title VII. And what does Title VII say? You're not allowed to take these things into consideration when hiring or employing people, but now you're saying that No. I'm just a layman here, but no. What? Let me try that. To end workplace affirmative action. Remember, affirmative action in colleges was race-conscious admissions, using race as a value factor in giving someone an educational opportunity. To end workplace affirmative action, which by extension one would think considering race in giving someone an employment opportunity, the court would need to overrule two of its long-standing precedents: United Steelworkers versus Weber, 1979, and Johnson v. Transportation Agency, 1987, which authorized affirmative action under Title VII. So even though Title VII explicitly says thou shalt not take race into consideration when giving someone an employment opportunity, affirmative action exists, which trumps that. Except, second, most DEI initiatives, most DEI initiatives in the workplace are not affirmative action in the sense addressed in this decision, because they do not involve employers taking race or other legally protected characteristics into account when making hiring or promotion decisions. Well, they're not legally protected, are they? Because you just said affirmative action in the workplace is authorized under long-standing precedents. So there is no legal protections for race. And most DEI initiatives don't consider race, but some do. So some Am I missing? I'm obviously missing something. I am obviously missing something. because they do not involve employers taking race or other legally protected characteristics into account when making hiring or promotions decisions. But if they decided to do so, they'd be perfectly fine to do so because you just said it is authorized under the Supreme Court with those two precedents. So they're okay to make decisions based on legally protected characteristics either way. Rather, they involve broader efforts to advance a more diverse and inclusive workplace. Define diversity. Define diversity, such as establishing employee resource groups. Okay, what is the basis on which most employee resource groups are created? Right? Except for always you have the veterans group, which is actually a sign of someone's merit and action. But what are employee resource groups generally based around? They're based around race, ethnicity, gender, and orientation. Right? Race, ethnicity, gender, and orientation. So, what? Creating mentorship and sponsorship programs based on what factors? It's usually race and gender. Conducting education and training based on what? Removing bias from internal procedures based on what? And so on. This decision has no direct bearing on those activities. You're right. It has no direct bearing on those activities. You know what does? Title VII, which you just told us doesn't count anymore. Right? Title VII doesn't count because of the two precedents you cited. So, I guess, what's the point of Title VII? And I've asked this, again, for the last 7 years, no association intended here. But if Title VII doesn't matter, what's the point of having Title VII? If you can, by our speakers here, use affirmative action, which is to value race in making a decision about somebody's fate in the workplace, why bother having Title VII? Why not just get rid of it? Right? Or amend it to take race out of the list of things you can't discriminate on the basis of. This decision has no direct bearing on those activities. Well, there's a whole lot of companies out there that seem to be scrambling to respond to this. Third, this decision relates to race, whereas DEI initiatives involve a range of classifications. What, DEI doesn't involve race? Wait a second. As soon as you said affirmative action in the workplace is legal, all of this goes by the wayside. What are you worried about? What other arguments need to be made? The two legal precedents you cited, according to you, authorize affirmative action in the workplace. And affirmative action in the workplace, when compared to affirmative action in colleges, is using race as a mark in your favor or disfavor for opportunity, right? Okay, so if affirmative action is legal in the workplace, why are you worrying? If Title VII is effectively nullified for the sake of race in the workplace, who cares? But anyway, third, this decision relates to race, whereas DEI initiatives involve a range of classifications, including gender, sexual orientation, disability, age, socioeconomic status, and more. Yeah, it's that and more part. You tell me race is not involved in DEI initiatives. This decision does not implicate DEI efforts in those other domains. But you didn't say that race isn't involved in DEI initiatives. Oh my gosh, guys, this is nuts. In the wake of this decision, what can US-based companies do to take race and ethnicity into account when making hiring and promotion decisions? Well, they already can. They just told us that affirmative action is permissible in the workplace on the basis of those two legal precedents. And again, for reference, United Steelworkers versus Weber, 1979, and Johnson v. Transportation Agency, 1987. Now, in the 7 years that I've been doing this, as far as I know, I have never, ever heard of those cases being cited as an authorization for DEI practices in the workplace. I have never heard of that before. Okay, so I'm going to take it on faith, for the sake of this article, that our writers, that our speakers are being truthful and accurate when they say that affirmative action in the workplace, for all intents and purposes, is legal, despite Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So if it is legal to use affirmative action policies in the workplace, and it has been since 1979 and or 1987, however you look at it, then why is there any question as to what companies can do? In the wake of this decision, which our authors have already said has no effect on DEI companies, DEI programs in companies, what can US-based companies do to take race and ethnicity into account when making hiring and promotion decisions? Is that something that you want? Is that something you desire to have true in this country? Just listen to that question for a second. How can we take race and ethnicity into account when making hiring and promotion decisions? What was the Civil Rights Act? What was Title VII? While the initial impact of this decision on workplace DEI is limited, well, no, it's the impact of the decision has no impact on DEI because it's not related. You just told us that in so many words in the previous section. These things are not attached to each other because DEI is covered on a completely different legal precedent. Okay, but while the initial impact of this decision on workplace DEI is limited, we expect that the court may use similar reasoning to outlaw affirmative action under Title VII in a future case. Good. What is the point of Title VII? Accordingly, the safest course is to ensure that concrete employment decisions around hiring and promotion are based on identity-neutral merit considerations and do not involve considerations of characteristics protected by Title VII, race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. But they already have protection under the precedents you listed, right? Affirmative action is legal under Title VII in the workplace, right? Why do they have anything to worry about? So wait, the question is, what can U.S. companies do to take race and ethnicity into account? And you're saying you shouldn't take them into account because that's legally sketchy under Title VII, even though they have cover under these precedents to ignore Title VII. Am I taking crazy pills here? So this entire time that I've been doing my channel, DEI policies have not been flying in the face of the law. They have, in fact, had cover from the law since 1979. But Title VII never applied to DEI. DEI was never at risk of violating the law because Title VII doesn't matter because of two precedents. Literally, this is the first I'm hearing of this, but okay. At the same time, our legal experts are telling us that even though affirmative action is legal, you still shouldn't assess people's opportunities on the basis of their race, even though affirmative action is legal. And the publication here is asking, how can we still assess people on the basis of their race and ethnicity when hiring people? Nonetheless, companies can advance racial diversity in hiring and promotions by, and here's a list, investing in pipeline programs to diversify the talent pool. So investing in racially discriminatory talent pipelines? But didn't you say you need to ensure that concrete employment decisions around hiring and promotion are based on identity-neutral merit considerations? Conducting targeted outreach to diverse colleges to find more qualified applicants, even though you said ensure that concrete employment decisions around hiring and promotion are based on identity-neutral merit considerations? Auditing internal policies and procedures relating to recruitment, performance, evaluation, compensation, and promotion to find and eliminate implicit bias. Creating employee resource groups to build a more inclusive culture for underrepresented cohorts, even though you advise to ensure that concrete employment decisions around hiring and promotion are based on identity-neutral merit considerations. Conducting education and training on inclusive hiring and promotion practices that don't involve racial considerations, obviously. Establishing mentorship and sponsorship programs not centered around, I could just repeat myself. Employers can adopt these programs and more while still ensuring that concrete employment decisions such as hiring and promotion are based on identity-neutral merit considerations. This is This has got to be some of the most ridiculous mental gymnastics I have read in recent history. And that's saying something. If it's legal to consider race or other identity aspects in an affirmative action construct because of the two legal precedents you cited, why are you advising people not to? If they have legal cover to do so, why are you advising them not to? What do US-based companies need to be careful to not do? For example, do they need to use different language and call DEI or diversity something else? If what you are doing, oh my God, okay. We think it is unnecessary to revamp the language in this field. Although the court held that the university's interests in achieving a diverse student body did not justify a race-conscious admissions policy, companies are still allowed to strive for a diverse workforce. That being said, employers particularly nervous about the possible knock-on effects of this decision might consider making a few shifts in emphasis. Okay, let's start with the opening sentence of this paragraph and continue with the closing sentence. We think it is unnecessary to revamp the language in this field. That being said, employers particularly nervous about the possible knock-on effects of this decision might consider making a few shifts in emphasis. Again, we think it is unnecessary to revamp the language. First example, from cohorts to concerns. Expand programs targeted at particular demographic cohorts to include people of any identity who are concerned about that topic, e.g., opening a DEI initiative to people of any identity who care about DEI, not just underrepresented cohorts. Example 2, from diversity to de-biasing. Oh my gosh, here we go, guys. This is it. Let's keep our ears open in the future, okay? If we start seeing something like de-biasing efforts in a company. From diversity to de-biasing, de-emphasize the goal of achieving specific demographic outcomes. 25 by 2025, and focus more on the goal of leveling the playing field by addressing unfair biases and barriers. Even a court that embraces colorblindness cannot object to a program that seeks to remove bias from hiring and promotion decisions. Sure it can. By what mechanism do you seek to achieve that goal? Does it involve racial assessment? From numbers to narratives, focus less on strict numerical metrics and targets and more on inviting candidates to share hardships or other narrative aspects of their background. Yes, avoid percentage quotas in your racial or gender demographics. Golly, but wait a second. None of this is illegal, right? We're legally covered under the two cases you cited, right? I'm going to really need to look into those two cases. Because like I say, that's the first I've ever heard of that in 7 years of doing this. From unique to universal, focus less on unique programs aimed at addressing each demographic group's concerns one by one, and lean into frameworks that emphasize that a culture of diversity, inclusion, and belonging benefits everyone, including members of majority or dominant groups. To reiterate, we do not believe such shifts are essential at this time, but they are worth considering for companies worried that their existing programs might create unnecessary legal exposure. What legal exposure? You told us it's all legal. You told us there's nothing to worry about. Oh, Jesus. Why should US-based companies invested in creating a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion keep in mind going forward? First, keep calm. As noted above, this decision did not overturn decisions authorizing affirmative action in the workplace, nor did it outlaw the many forms of DEI that do not involve affirmative action. Then what's to worry about? Yeah, exactly. Keep calm. Second, recognize that risks exist in both directions. Organizations tempted to retreat from their DEI commitments may reduce some legal risk associated with reverse discrimination claims, but they may create new risks to employee engagement and morale, reputation, as well as legal risks from the pro-DEI side. Specifically, supporters of DEI are starting to bring progressive shareholder suits against corporate directors and officers for making false statements about their commitments to diversity and inclusion. It is critical to maintain DEI initiatives. The key is to do so in a smart and responsible manner. Double down, everybody, but just double down more sensibly. Third, conduct a self-audit of your current DEI initiatives. You might consider using a traffic light system that codes programs as red, high risk, yellow, medium risk, and green, low risk. A red program could include, for example, a formal quota or set aside that reserves hiring or promotion slots for underrepresented groups, or a policy that instructs managers to use race, ethnicity, or sex as a tiebreaker in hiring and promotion decisions. Why is it high risk? You just told us that affirmative action is legal in the workplace. What? It's been legal this whole time. It's been legal since at least 1987, right? So what's the risk? Why is it a high-risk situation? The affirmative action decision didn't affect affirmative action in the workplace because that's Title VI, not Title VII. Title VII is exempt from having to worry about that kind of stuff. You just told us. Why are there even high-risk situations? Why is it high risk to decide to employ someone on the basis of their race, ethnicity, or gender? There's no risk at all. You told us it was legal. A yellow program. Now, wait a second. Red, yellow. Is this some race-based? Okay, anyway, a yellow program might include, for example, ambitious demographic targets, e.g. X% Black leaders by 2030, with manager performance evaluation and compensation incentives tied to meeting those benchmarks. It's like I'm reading through a clip show of all the videos I've done on my channel on DEI over the last 7 years. Once you, what's a green? What's a green one? What's a green program? What's a safe program? You give us a red, you give us a yellow. What's a green one? Okay. Once you've audited your programs, you can speak with your legal counsel about how to mitigate risk in the red and yellow programs, perhaps through the shifts in emphasis described above. Yeah, the changes in language, which we don't think are necessary, but just in case. You can also then confidently defend the green programs whenever you encounter pushback within your organization. Finally, equip yourself to make the affirmative case both moral, quote, it's the right thing to do, and business case, quote, diversity helps the bottom line for DEI. You got anything to back that up? The movement that brought this challenge to affirmative action in higher education is also attacking critical race theory in schools, DEI in the workplace, and other identity-conscious activities. Yes, because they all originate from the same concept as affirmative action in schools, that you should identify someone's worth or opportunity on the basis of their skin color. They all spring from the same rotten fruit. While diehard opponents of DEI I'll try that again. While diehard opponents of DEI are unlikely to be persuaded, you mean like legal scholars and people who believe in the Constitution and the Civil Rights Act? Yeah, that's true. We believe many individuals are in the movable middle, open to supporting DEI, but at risk of being convinced by opponents of DEI initiatives are unfair or otherwise inappropriate. But they're not. You just told us they are legally sound, right? There's nothing to worry about. Remind yourself of both the moral and business reasons why DEI is so important, and be prepared to advocate for those values in internal and external conversations. Okay, this is probably, I hate to say it. I hate to say that just by dumb luck I came across this. This might be the most significant article on the subject I have read ever, because for the first time, someone has cited law in order to justify DEI. I'm going to have to take a look at those two legal decisions because I've never heard of them before. And I'm insanely curious to know how those two decisions trump Title VII. I'm direly curious. Okay, guys, how long have I been going now? I don't even know. Holy cats. 2 hours and 15 minutes. Oh, this is a marathon. Okay. My stamina might run out before I have articles to complete here. So let me check on the subject matter of the next couple articles because let's check that one real quick. No, I'm going to ignore that one and this one. Yeah, okay, I'm going to stick to the theme. I got one article left. The other two articles, they're peripherally involved. Maybe I'll make them a Discord exclusive in reading them. We'll see. But I'm going to read one more article, and I'm going to be looking up those other. That might be the subject of the next Sunday stream, reading through the relevance of those two legal precedents. As pertains to Title VII and DEI specifically. But in the meantime, I'm going to move on to what will be my final article today. And thank you guys for sticking with me. And as I have done at every intermission, please take a look at the top of the chat box and the link in the description to the Gary Sinise Foundation in support of U.S. veterans. If you can donate to that, please do so on this, our Independence Day, 4th of July. If you can't donate, that's fine. But if you can share that link out on social media, that would be very much appreciated. I'll take a second here to both drink some water. Oh, was I roboting? I apologize. Probably because I opened up my PDF program. Yeah, if I decide to open up any other application during the course of a broadcast, StreamYard hates that for some reason. Seems to just absolutely hate having anything else open or running. So hopefully that's gone now. Let's see. Guy in his room. I've heard that trans affirmative people are doing similar mental gymnastics because of laws being passed against child trans surgeries, etc. Well, I've seen, like, for example, taking the subject matter of a case and saying that that is the argument in the case. For example, the web developer case that had to do with, well, it was about a web developer saying, because of my religious beliefs, I shouldn't be made to put together websites for gay marriages. And people are like, oh, this is an attack on gay rights. This is an attack on gay marriage. Except that the case was about, can the state compel your speech? Yes or no? It's taking the, like I say, the surrounding wrapper of the case at hand, but not actually focusing on the legal precedent that's at question. And so we're seeing that a lot in the last few days. And anybody who reads the decisions, they don't have a leg to stand on. And even in the dissents, where they try to make that same kind of case, it doesn't stand up as far as I'm concerned. Let's see. Anything else real quick before I move on to the next article? Faithless. They just cite the two. They do not explain what those cases are about or how they ruled specifically. Exactly. Which is why I think for the next Sunday stream, I'm going to find the decisions on both of those cases, and we'll just review them. Because, like I say, as far as I can tell, this is the first time in the entirety of my channel and always looking at DEI that I've ever heard either of those two cases or that there is a legal foundation for using affirmative action policies in private workplaces, despite Title VII. That is new information to me. And I've never heard any different to this point. And this is just, and not just the videos I've looked at, but just at everything else in the periphery of DEI that I've encountered. I've never heard of those two things before being the authorization for DEI practices. So, but I'm also very curious as to why they spent so much time warning employers away from everything that this thing supposedly protects them from as far as legal liability, and changing their language and assessing their policies, and don't use identity-based things. Okay. Anyway, last article, and we loop back to NPR. With affirmative action gutted for college, race-conscious work programs may be next. Let's see if NPR also cites those two precedents in here. The Supreme Court's ruling on Thursday that effectively ends affirmative action in higher education raises questions about the future of employer-run initiatives and programs that consider race, which exist extensively across the United States. Yes. And again, how does that not run up against Title VII? Or if it does, how do those legal precedents get around it? Though the opinion focuses on higher education, some legal experts say it could lead to changes in commonplace workplace initiatives like diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and environmental, social, and governance commitments. Yes, ESG is also implicated in this. I'm surprised nobody else brought that up. Quote, I already think there are going to be some real repercussions, said Alvin Tillery, a political science professor at Northwestern University who runs a consulting firm that works with organizations and companies, including Google and Abbott. Google and Abbott, I don't know what Abbott is, on DEI-related programs. Tillery says he expects the mainly conservative groups that backed Students for Fair Admission's lawsuit, which was the subject of the Supreme Court's ruling, to shift their focus in part onto race-conscious programs in the workplace. I am all for that. If they can overturn whatever is providing cover to DEI programs, good. Quote, I think that is likely already happening, and so businesses will have to be prepared for that, he said. Well, but they've been operating under good faith all this time, right? Because, as our last article said, they've had cover. Is NPR going to tell us about this? Doing away with DEI-style programs has been a consistent part of conservative political messaging in recent years. Several right-leaning groups have already begun calling for further action, including America First Legal, a nonprofit run by former Donald Trump advisor Stephen Miller that's focused on doing away with race-focused policies. Quote, this ruling means we can strike hard legally in our courts now and win major victories. Now is the time to wage lawfare, that's a new one to me, against the DEI colossus, unquote, Miller wrote in a statement following the court's decision. Okay, well, in most other things, I probably would not agree with Stephen Miller on a lot of stuff, but in this instance, I'm curious to see how far he gets. But Tillery doesn't expect any changes to DEI initiatives overnight. He argues that these programs fall under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act and that companies can maintain their programs by reframing their language. Wait a second. Well, first off, he's right. The question of DEI's legality does fall under Title VII, because DEI is about employment and promotion and recruitment in companies. And Title VII deals with employment, recruitment, and promotion in companies under federal law. So he's right. It does fall under a Title VII question. But he's saying that they can maintain their programs by reframing their language. Where's the legal precedence? Quote, the current structure of the workforces in corporate America suggests that there are tons of gaps between the races, Tillery said. So disparities. Yes, you're right. You know, there's also disparities in population demographics. Is the population of this country an inherent conspiracy theory as well? Adding, quote, diversity, equity, and inclusion work can be reframed as trying to figure out what's behind the processes creating these gaps and then filling the void by creating structures and processes to make sure that you're not discriminating under Title VII, unquote. Okay, so you've identified that there is a disparity in the statistical comparison between races in your company. That one number is larger or smaller than another number. Okay, what's behind this disparity? Is it structural? Is it policy? Is it procedural? Is it conspiratorial? We have to find what is the secret behind this disparity. It couldn't be a reflection of population demographics. It couldn't be just random chance. If we're talking about gender, it couldn't be just general trends in life choices between the genders. There must be something else. And so we have to create structures and processes to address these disparities while not violating Title VII. And Title VII, what does Title VII say? Well, in brief, it says, thou shalt not take into consideration race, gender, ethnicity, or religion or country of origin when making employment decisions. So I'm not quite sure how you're going to square that circle. Plus, race-conscious programs already widely exist throughout the country. Yeah, unfortunately so, including within many large and influential companies nationwide. Well, is that an argumentative ad populum or something? Argumentum ad populum? And ahead of the court's decision, many companies had already weighed in and advocated to keep affirmative action policies within higher education in place. Yeah, they want affirmative action to stay in place as a legal protection, right? But we already know that affirmative action in workplaces is already covered by those two precedents. Why aren't you mentioning those two precedents? Why has no one ever mentioned those two cases in the last 7 years to my ears or eyes? Why aren't you listing those? Last summer, more than 80 major corporations and businesses filed 3 briefs with the Supreme Court in support, arguing these policies help increase workforce diversity and improve company performance. Well, maybe, I don't know, but either way, they filed briefs in support of it because it gives them legal cover for their own DEI operation. It gives them an excuse to adhere to ESG requirements. Quote, experience in a diverse university environment prepares students to interact with and serve racially diverse client and customer bases and to work with people of all backgrounds, unquote, according to one brief written by over 60 prominent businesses, including Apple, General Electric, Google, and Johnson & Johnson. Well, yep, that same argument was made before the court on the basis of what the benefits to college campuses were. And the court found, nope. Quote, the result is a business community more aligned with the public, increased profits, and business success, it added. Great. Show me the profit margin as compared to the racial makeup of your company. Draw me the line between the skin color of an employee and the inherent profit incentive. Please. Plus, to Tillery, many of the larger companies he consults for, so he's not biased himself, understand the importance of maintaining race-conscious programs, especially as members of Generation Z and future generations enter the workforce. Quote, and so while the Supreme Court, they live in a rarefied space where most of us don't live because we live in the real world, business leaders are going to need to figure out a way to make this work if they're going to source future talent and sell to future consumers, he says. Quote, and that's just the reality of it, unquote. What in the Sam Hill are you talking about? And why didn't you cite those legal precedents that give cover to diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in companies against Title VII? Okay, well, in the absence of the previous article, I, again, from reading this article, just feel like for the entirety of this endeavor, companies and organizations have been play acting that they're operating under legal cover because of affirmative action in colleges. That they can somehow extend and expand the legal precedent of affirmative action in colleges to private corporations because since their ends are the same and their means are the same, that they also enjoy some kind of protection. And now that this has gone by the wayside, oh, well, we have to change the words we use, and we also have to be aware of Title VII. What, you didn't have to be aware of Title VII to this point? When did affirmative action in colleges apply to Title VII? It never did. Even the court said so. So what do you have to worry about? Oh, except that Title VII says you can't assess somebody on the basis of their race in employment. Oh, but DEI programs do assess people on the basis of their race in employment. But we just have to change the language and it'll be okay to assess people on the basis of their race in employment. They have absolutely no idea what they're doing. They have been operating under a delusion this entire time, and suddenly the chickens have come home to roost, and they are falling over themselves in mental athletics, trying to figure out a way to still discriminate on the basis of race. And everybody on that side of the argument would call themselves a liberal and a progressive. This is insane. And apparently now, arguing against racial discrimination is a right-wing position. On this, today, our Independence Day, we have gone through the looking glass. I know it's been that way for a while, but it is more evident to me now in reading these last couple of articles and going through this quasi-intellectualism of racial discrimination. They're doing everything they can to rationalize discriminating on the basis of race in the workplace. And yet I am sure that these same people, if you show them a photo from the Deep South in 1954 that had a sign out front that said whites only, they'd say that's bad. And they'd be right to do so. And yet somehow, in their own minds, it's okay if we do it for the right races. Holy cats. All right, everybody, I'm going to start winding down here because I think I've both my voice and my energy level is starting to wane a little bit. But I'll take a second for you guys. Anything else you want to add? Super Cooper TV, what if the people they are elevating don't want to do the jobs they want those people to do? Do they have no choice? I don't know. I mean, it's the moral imperative. You know, what if you get into a job and you realize I'm not cut out for it, but, you know, I got the job, I'm getting a paycheck, but I'm miserable because I keep, again, go back to Clarence Thomas's story about his reaction to coming to the revelation that he got where he was because of his race. Right? And I've seen so many people just absolutely shellac Thomas for that story. It's like, well, you benefited from affirmative action and now you're against it? And these are some of the same people who I've heard before say we have to tear down the systems of privilege in this country, Yeah, so someone trying to tear down a system that they benefited from that was inherently unfair is now a bad thing? Yeah. And again, the question mark that goes over somebody's head, if you know you have a race conscious or gender conscious or whatever other policy in your company, and someone is suddenly placed into a position of authority who falls within one of those demographics, why shouldn't you suspect that they benefited from it? Why would it be wrong to do so? Let's see. Anything else? Faithless. Lawfare is what they are doing to Trump and the January 6ers, the process of the punishment. I am not going to wade into that here. That is a whole other kettle of fish. And I am not nearly as well versed. As minimally versed as I am in DEI law and affirmative action law, I am in no position to start talking about that. But yeah, there's plenty of criticism to go around and how the law is adjudicated from one person to another, from one socioeconomic status to another, from one party to another, associated or otherwise. Yeah, those are stories for other days. Just another guy. Source, trust me, bro. Yeah. Well, there's so many examples of this. I won't give you any. Plenty of things have proven that, but I won't, cite anything. Let's see. Anybody else, guys? I know that a lot of you guys have things to say in here, but I'm starting to run out of gas, as it were. So before I go any further, I'm going to just end it here. You can hear it in my voice. So everyone, show note real quick. Thursday, per usual, at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, I'll be doing another TED Excellence. We'll take a look at an off-brand TED Talk for fun and education. I call it Fun-education. As well with that, the Sunday stream this coming Sunday will be on Sunday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, where if I don't come up with something better, I'll be finding those two case precedents that were cited in the previous article, because apparently, I've never heard of them, but apparently they allow for racial discrimination in the workplace despite Title VII, and have done so since 1987. And yet no one has ever mentioned them before this point, even our NPR guy who's doing everything he can to try to justify what's going on. But anyway, so that'll be something. I'm getting into the habit of reading legal precedents and court decisions or something. But you learn a lot doing so. I tell you what, you learn a lot. And again, a reminder, at the top of the chat box and in the description, there is a link to the donation page to the Gary Sinise Foundation in support of our veterans. And on this Independence Day, July 4th, please consider donating there if you can. If you can't donate, that's fine, but please consider sharing that link out on social media to help out the people who have served our country and put their lives on the line and lost them in support of our Constitution, of our country, of our freedoms. As tenuous as they may be sometimes, bit by bit, we still fight forward for them. But everyone, thank you so much for joining me. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very, very little to do. Everybody who donated, either to myself and most importantly to the Gary Sinise Foundation or shared the link out, thank you guys so much for your help and your support and your generosity. I really do appreciate it. I hope you all have a good rest of your Tuesday. I hope you have a good rest of your 4th of July, especially on this day with so many dangerous elements out there, specifically fireworks. Please take care of yourselves and be safe. Enjoy the food. Enjoy the day off if you have it. I hope you are all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and I will see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.